This is our Schoolnet November 2025 webinar where we are going to be talking about data reports. Normally, I have Catherine Simone with me, but she was unable to join us today. But hopefully, most of you are familiar with Catherine. If you are not, she is our implementation manager from Pearson. She is wonderful and just a great support for North Carolina with Schoolnet. And then my name is Rebecca Stokes. I am the product manager for NCDPI. Both of our email addresses are right there on the screen, and they're also on slide 3. Please feel free to email us anytime you have a question with anything concerning Schoolnet, whether that is specifically with data reports, or if you have a question about a test, or you're trying to build a test as a new teacher and you just need a little bit of guidance. We are here to support however we can. All right. All right, so a few housekeeping things. The first one is CEU questions. So this is an hour webinar, which is going to be equivalent to 0.1 CEUs for participating in the live webinar today. The type of credit is actually decided by your school or district. So you want to make sure that you are following the approval process that your district has set up. You can provide a written justification of what the session was about for the type of credit you are requesting, but just again, keep in mind that your district would approve, or they can choose not to approve that type of credit that you are requesting. So just want to make sure to put that out there. But to receive credit, you must be logged into the live webinar. And those of you that are here with us right now are obviously in the live webinar. So it does track who's in the webinar and how long you were able to participate. We do have feedback at the very end of the session. It's on the very last slide. And so if you are in the session with us for the duration and complete the feedback, then I will be sending out an email with the recording, the slide deck, and your CEU certificate for anyone that participated with us during that time. If you are watching this on YouTube at a later time, then unfortunately, CEU credit cannot be given for watching recorded webinars. All right, if you have questions, we are not using Teams webinar this year. We are just using strictly Teams. The chat feature is going to be on the left-hand side at the top of your icons for Teams. So if at any time you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. I am going to try and pause in between sections to check the chat since I don't have Catherine here with me today to kind of moderate. So I'm just going to pause in between sections to check that chat. So put any questions that you may have there and I will make sure to get to them. All right, so here is our agenda for the day. We're going to talk about the student profile data, power of the homepage and what data is available there, your pre-formatted reports that you have in Schoolnet, and then we will talk about the reporting dashboard and how you can access prior year data, a comparison report, and how you can view subgroup data within there. And then we just briefly are going to talk about some upcoming sessions that we have. All right, so student profile data. And if you have ever joined me for a session, then you know that I am not going to be spending our time on the slide deck. I'm actually going to hop into the training site so that we can see everything live. I am going to log in as a teacher, but I will, oh, don't do that to me. But I will be going into a leadership view as well. All right, let me let these people in real quick. I'm going to have to go incognito. Well, I'm trying to get to it. There we go. Again, I apologize. I am solo today, going to do those things as well. Okay. So I'm going to just shrink this down over here so that I can see the chat, but also see you guys. So I'll try to make sure to zoom in. Okay. So let me go to the training site. All right, so first up, we're going to be talking about the power of the, oh no, not the power of the homepage. We're actually going to be talking about the student profile data. So let's talk about that first. So if you are a teacher in Schoolnet, there are a few ways you can get to a student profile, but the easiest way is here from the homepage. So let me zoom in a little bit just so you can see it a little bit better. Whereas if you are on the call and you have leadership rights, leadership actually is going to have a search bar right here where I'm kind of moving my mouse on the top right of your screen where you can search for a student. But teachers are actually going to be able to view that in their roster. So if you are a teacher, when you are on your Schoolnet homepage and it looks like this, if I scroll down, then you are going to see, I have learned actually recently that mine says choose a section, but when you are in Schoolnet, it does not say choose a section. I believe it says like my classroom right here, but it's either way, it's a section on the homepage where you can see your courses from Infinite Campus. So don't be confused if the training site says choose a section and yours says my classroom. They're both functioning the exact same way. We just have to get this changed in the training site. But what I want to show you is that where your sections are, where they're coming from Infinite Campus, you're going to choose whichever one it is that you want to look for your students in. So I'll just keep mine at this reading course or this reading section. But when I scroll down past the classroom assessment monitor, go all the way down, I'm going to see at the bottom of my homepage a classroom profile. Okay, so this is going to list my entire roster of students for that section I've selected. So if you change the section, then of course that roster is going to change unless you are in a self-contained class and you have the same students the entire day. But if I scroll down and I'm in my profile, anything that is blue in Schoolnet is a hyperlink. So all of these student names are blue, letting me know that it's going to link somewhere else, and it actually links to the student's profile. So if I wanted to view this student right here, I would just click on their name and it is going to load. There we go. And there's lots of tabs of data in here, but if we are focused on data reports for this webinar, we want to highlight just a few tabs, okay? The first one is the standardized test tab, okay? So if you click here, what it is it's going to show EOG and EOC scores. And then of course, if the student is older, then it would show like DIPLS and TRC data. We don't have Amplify data in Schoolnet, so it would just be the students that were on DIPLS and the TRC. But you do have EOG and EOC. You do not have it for last school year yet. We are working on getting that from Infinite Campus over into Schoolnet, so we hope to have that very soon. But you do have all of the prior years, and once I send an email letting you know that last year's data is available, I want you to, excuse me, I want you to know where you can access that. But if you go to the standardized testing tab, there's going to be an option that says show filters. That is actually going to be where you can change the year. Now, in the training site, we just have the 2018-2019 school year, but you should see the 23-24 school year as your latest. And like I said, once we get the 24-25 school year uploaded from Infinite Campus, then that would show as well. But you change the filter to whichever school year, and then you would be able to see any data that the student might have on a state test. So again, depending on their grade level that they're currently in, will depend on what type of data you see. But if they are older, then you will be able to see those EOG and EOC scores, and it will just show you the level and the score that they received on that assessment. The next tab, when focused on data that we want to show, is this enrollment and academic record. Let this user in real quick. There we go. Pull that chat back up. Perfect. And what you can get from this tab is, of course, you'd be able to see the students' enrollment. You'd be able to see all of their previous years of enrollment as well. And you'd be able to scroll down and see their academic record. And since we do not currently sync to the Infinite Campus gradebook, you would not be able to see the final scores from the 24-25 school year, but you would be able to see their end of the year or semester grades for the years prior. And then once we are able to have that connection, you should be able to see those scores as well. But again, want you to know where they're going to be when they are available. Yeah. I have had a few people come in, so I'm just going to put the slide deck in the chat. There we go. All right. And then the last two tabs with being focused on data are the benchmark test tab and the classroom test tab. So the benchmark test tab is exactly that. It's going to show all of the data that the student has on any benchmark assessments within Schoolnet for that year. So that's going to be any of the district benchmarks or the school level benchmarks as well. So it is going to separate the data into subject area. So you can see ELA and math and reading for this student. So any assessment that the student has taken this year, it's going to show the name of the assessment, the date and time submitted, what their score was. You also have a standards tab where it would break down the standards that have been assessed so far and their latest score on that particular assessment or on that particular standard, excuse me. Okay, you do have the options to show filters and you can go back to see previous years as well. Okay, same for the classroom test, except this is going to show all of the data for my classroom assessments that the student has had that year. So again, it's going to separate by subject area. You also can do standard, and you also have that show filters option to be able to see previous years as well. Okay. So that is the student's profile. There's lots of information in here that we could talk about, but that would be for a different type of session. So since we are just focused on data reports, those are going to be the four that we are talking about today, but wanted to make sure that you knew what all information was available to you as a teacher and as leadership roles for each student that you have in your school or your district, depending on your level. Okay, all right. So now we are moving on to the power of the homepage. I do have the chat up and I don't see any chat, so I will continue to move on. But again, if any question comes up, please feel free to put that in the chat and I'll make sure that I get to it. Okay, so let me click home. All right, so if I am in like a teacher, then I have a lot of information right here on my homepage. So again, back to this my classroom or my sections, it might say. It's really going to bother me if I don't just let me just go in and see what it says real quick, because that's going to bother me. I want to make sure I'm telling you correctly. Okay, yes, it says my classroom for a teacher, whereas in the training site, it says choose a section. Okay, I thought that's what it was. All right, so if we are at the My Classroom section, depending on, again, which section of students you want to view. So if I wanted to view data on my math section, then I would change that there. And that is going to automatically change the classroom assessment monitor, which is the widget right below. Okay, and I believe on a teacher's home screen is actually on the left-hand side, but it still says the same thing, the classroom assessment monitor. So what that's going to do is it's going to show four different tabs. Okay, so your district assessments and your school assessments are going to be on this first tab, and the latest assessment is going to show right here at the top. But there is a drop down right here if the teacher wanted to view a different assessment for that section of students. Okay, so you'd be able to see any assessment that the student has taken that year, but the most current one is going to be the one that displays first, but you can, of course, change it. But if I wanted to view this one, then I'd be able to instantly see my summary. So this is going to give me a overall of how this section did. If it's a district or school level assessment, then there'd also be data for my section compared to the school, if it was a school assessment, and also compared to the district if it's a district assessment. So those of you that are on the call that have district-wide CFAs, for example, then you would be able to see your section compared to the entire district on this assessment. You're not going to be able to see data for all the other students in the district, but you would be able to see how overall the district is doing in each score group compared to your section of students. Okay. Now, if I continue scrolling, it is going to show a color code of the cut scores. Okay. And then you'd be able to scroll down and see your students with their color-coded cut score that they received on this assessment. Okay. Now, even though we are looking at the most current assessment of this EOG mixed review, beside each student on the homepage, you're going to see these colorful bars to the right. Okay, that is going to show their last 10 assessments. Okay, so you'd be able to really get a good glance at how the student is doing in this particular subject area on the last 10 assessments. So I'm just going to take this student, for example. So I can see, and if I hover over, then it'll actually show me what the student received as a score, what date they took the test, and what the name of that assessment was. But I can see that this student started off in the orange and red score groups, which we know from our code up here are the lower end. But I can also see that they have now since started increasing in their growth and they are progressing on these other assessments in the different score groups. So it's a great way to get some at a glance data. Now, of course, if these are addressing different standards, then the student is going to have a little bit of a mixture of these colors. But it's a great way to not have to go into each assessment when I could just kind of hover over and see, okay, this student got 33% on this specific standard EOG review, and then I can see like this one, they were a 93. So I'm able to quickly be able to see that comparison data there. But if I keep scrolling back up, I do want to show you one other thing before I actually hop into the data reports. You have the same thing for this classroom test tab, except this is going to be all of your My Classroom assessments, so those that are private to the teacher. But you have the same thing. You have a drop down where you can view other assessments. Since it is a My Classroom, you are not going to have that comparison to the school or the district because only your section took this assessment. So you'd be able to see your section score groups, but then you'd be able to scroll down and see the students and how they performed on that particular assessment. Okay. You do have a standardized testing tab, but that's not going to show anything here because it would be for the 23-24, but that's for like the EOG and EOC type data that was in their profile. And then the test management, that is just showing you upcoming assessments or ones that have been completed, ones that are scheduled. So it kind of just gives you an idea of which ones are coming up for your students. There's a quick glance at passcodes to be able to see as well. So all of that is on the home page. But if I go back to the first tab, that's district and local test, and I'm just going to stick with this sample assessment here. I can see if I click on the performance by standard. So let's see, let me just pick this standard here. Okay, that's going to show specifically how these students did on that one standard that was covered on this assessment. So in this drop down, the only standards that are going to show are going to be the ones that were tagged on this assessment. But if I just wanted to see how overall, really quick, how my students did on NBT2, then I'd be able to see on average, my class scored 63%, and I'd be able to quickly see how the students did. I can see how many questions there were for this particular standard and how they did on that specific standard on this assessment. all of that from the homepage. The teacher doesn't have to navigate from here at all to get all of that information. Okay. So that covers everything that is on the homepage. So that's our next section. Again, I don't see any questions in the chat, so I will continue moving forward. And our next section, I believe, is pre-formatted reports. I want to make sure that I am correct here. Let's see here. Power the homepage. Yep, pre-formatted reports. So let me hop back over here. I make sure I was staying on task. All right, so there are, again, two different ways that you can get to the pre-formatted reports, but if we're already on the homepage, that might as well be where we stay. So if I want to look at the reports again for this particular assessment, then you'll see on the right-hand side where it says reports. So these are all of the pre-formatted ones that we're used to seeing in the reporting dashboard. So straight from the homepage, I can just click test summary right here, and it's going to take me to the reports for that particular assessment. Now, this one was a district benchmark. So I do have a few additional reports that I wouldn't see on a My Classroom. Like, for example, this score response distribution, this tab is not available on a My Classroom assessment because it's comparing the data from the section to the school to the district. So this tab is only available on school, excuse me, on school and district assessments. So I did want to point that out, but all of the other ones I am going to see even on a My Classroom assessment. So the first tab we're going to look at is this test summary, and it is exactly that. It is a summary of how your students did. So it's going to, of course, show you all of the cut scores with the color codes. It's going to show you the percentage of your section that performed in that color code and how many students that was. Okay, you'll be able to see on average how your students did here, along with the color-coded cut scores on the left-hand side as well. On the right-hand side, this is the only report that has that, but there is a student response report. So if I were to click that, it's going to ask what information I want to include, and I'm going to export that and hope that it downloads quickly. So while it is working on downloading, I'm going to continue moving on, and then I will hopefully be able to show it to you in just a second. But every report, there we go. Let me just save that to my desktop. There we go. Every report has an export option, but some of the reports are going to be an export to PDF, like this one. Others are going to be an export to PDF or Excel. So depending on the report, you would see both of those options, but every single report can be exported in one way or another. Let me let this user in real quick and put this back in there. There we go. All right, so let me see if this has finished. Perfect. Okay, so this was this student response report. So again, the test summary is the only report that's going to show this, but what it is it's a kind of a detailed printout per se if you wanted to send this information home with a student. So if you do paper copies or I know my child is elementary level, but they get a like Monday folder, and all of their grades come home a paper copy as well as it's entered into the grade book as well, but I get the paper copies. So if you do that as well, then you would be able to print this out. It does have little dotted lines for you to be able to cut that into strips so that it's not one printout per student, but it'll of course have the student's name, it'll have their ID number if you choose to have that being shown. It'll have the date, the test, what their score was, and it'll show the questions they got correct and what the correct answer was if they got it incorrect. It doesn't show them the question, it just kind of lets the student and the parent know which ones they got. Will we receive a digital literacy credit for this PD? Your district actually decides what type of credit it is, Sydney. So you would get a certificate and that you can submit to your district, but your district ultimately decides what type of credit it is. Okay. All right. So let me let this person in real quick. There we go. Okay. All right. So that is the student response report. But while we're here on the test summary, I'm going to continue scrolling down. I'm going to be able to see all of my students, the date and time they submitted, what their score was. The proficiency is just going to say yes or no, and that is going to be based off of these cut scores here. So sometimes this is a hot topic because not everyone agrees with those proficiency scores. Completely understandable. If you do not agree, then I would just completely ignore that proficiency column there, because there is not a way for us to change this because we would have to change it for the entire state. So since districts kind of vary on that proficiency level, we're not able to change it just for one district to look a certain way because we are a all or nothing platform. So that is why we cannot change it as of right now. So if you disagree with that proficiency, then you can, of course, just ignore the yes or no and just pay attention to what the score was. Okay. You do have three different tabs here on the test summary. So you can view the data as student, you can view as subgroup, or you can view as standard. The standard is going to be as a whole. So it'll let you know what standards you covered on the assessment, how many questions were tagged with that standard, and how your students did on average with that particular standard. Okay. All right. So scrolling back up, we're going to move on to the standard analysis tab. And what that's going to do is it's going to show every standard that was covered on this assessment. It is going to color code them based off of how your entire section did. It will have the color code cut scores down below, but if you hover over the standard, it will of course list the standard and it will read out what the specific standard says. Then it'll give you the average score and how many items you had tagged with that standard. But if I scroll down, you'll be able to see my export option here, but you see all of your students and it's going to show all of their scores per standard at the top. So these are the math practices, but if I see my standards here, the number on the right beside the standard lets me know how many questions I had. So this MD7 with 4 questions, that would be a more accurate picture of how the students are doing versus a standard that only covered with 1 question. So if I wanted to focus on this MD7, I can click where it says average score and it'll sort my students so that I can easily see my students that were not proficient and then my ones that were proficient and then my bubble students who are kind of right on the edge of either being proficient or not proficient. So if I'm doing intervention groups or if I'm doing like reteach and retest with a certain group of students, this is a great way to get that data per standard. So I can sort any of these that I wanted to see and it'll change the students based off of whichever standard you are viewing. And you can also view the subgroup tab as well, and that will break down per standard as well. Okay. This is a really great report. This is one, if I only have 5 minutes, the standard analysis and the item analysis are the two that I would be going over. But you get lots of great data, but I just really like how detailed that standard analysis is. Your next tab is the student analysis. So this is going to give you, of course, a list of all of your students that are in that section that you're viewing. But it'll also list out their UID number, their race reporting category. There is a column that says like EC or special ed status. It is going to say no. So you don't even have to pay attention to this column because we cannot pull EC data from ECATS into Schoolnet. So it will by default say no. Even if you know that a student has an IEP, it is still going to say no. So you can just completely ignore that column, okay? We are able to pull in the AIG and the ESL student identification tags. Excuse me. So you would be able to see yes or no for those two columns. And then you would be able to see their score to the right. So if you wanted to sort by your students, your ESL students, then you could change this to yes, and then it would only show you those students that were ESL identified, and you'd be able to sort for those students and see their score, or you could just select no, and then you'd be able to see the scores for those students that don't have that identification and their scores as well. And you can do the same thing for the AIG as well. Saying as well a lot, I apologize. You can see the export option right here to the right. Okay. The next tab. So just like standard analysis is going to break down the student data per standard, the item analysis is going to break down student performance by question. So this is another great report, especially if you are assessing maybe just like two standards on a test. And you had like 5 items, let's say, for those two standards, then it's a great way because you can sort by the standard and then break down the question to see as it's loading. I'll just kind of give a backstory on this, but you'd be able to see how the students are doing per item, especially if you notice that there was a lower proficiency within the same standard, then you can really assess that question. Was it a vocabulary word in the question? Was it one of those ones that has like the italicized bold, like everything except for, that sometimes can trip our students up? So it's just a great way of really trying to break down the students' thinking with that particular question. So here is our item analysis. And what I personally recommend is to change the order, because right now it's going to be showing the order based off of how they are in the assessment. Sorry, I was letting someone in real quick. But what I like to do is to order it by standard. So I like to change this to standard performance. So then it's going to group the questions by standard. So this one right here is a great example. So all three of these items covered in BT2, but I can see that I had 100% proficiency on this item, but then I had 33% on this item. So even though they were the same standard, something clearly was different between item 7 and item 9. So if I scroll down, then I'm able to see, which this one was 100%, so I'd be able to see nothing but green checks. But on item 9, I'm starting to see a pattern that a lot of my students, when they chose the answer and they chose it incorrectly, a lot of them are choosing A. I do see some B and D in there as well, but it looks like majority of them selected A. So I can click where it says item 9. Now, if this is a district benchmark that you are looking at the test and it has security features on it to where teachers cannot see the item could possibly not load. This one luckily did not, so we don't have to worry about that. But you wouldn't have to worry about that with my classroom assessments either. So just know if you are looking at district benchmarks, there is a possibility that you would not be able to see the question and answer if the creator of the test put that security in place. But when I clicked on item 9, I'm able to see the question. I'm able to see the answer choices. Okay. And this was a district benchmark, so I'm able to compare to my school and also my district. So I can see that actually the most common error was B. So I saw a lot of A's, but it looked like B was actually the most common error. So I'm able to go over this with my students. I can put this up on the screen. We can go over it together, read it together, underline key parts. But already I can tell that more than likely this about is what tripped my students up, the ones that got it incorrect. So they were more than likely rounding incorrectly. They probably rounded to the nearest hundreds instead of the nearest 10. You know, I'm able to break that piece down for my students based off of this report. So that's one of the things that I just love about the item analysis. So I'm going to go back to item analysis. There we go. You also have the ability to highlight the low performing students. So it will put in pink all of the students that were below that proficiency. So I believe it's below 60% it will highlight, so that I'm just able to quickly see those students to see what they scored. If you selected on the test to track your item times, then this is the report that's going to show as well. There's a setting when you go to schedule an assessment where you can track student response times. And if this one had that setting, then it would actually show below each one of the students' names, and it would show down to the second how much time they spent per item. And you'd be able to see the total time that they spent on the assessment as well. Okay. All right. Moving right along. Our next tab, oh, I forgot to point this out. Here's my export option right here on the right-hand side. Um, but the next tab is Standards Mastery. This is a great report if you are building like enrichment or intervention or reteach groups. This is a great report to go to by the standard. So what it's going to do is it's going to show all of the standards on the assessment. It'll show you how many items you had, but it's going to show lots of these numbers. It does not matter which one you click on as long as it is in the row of the standard. So if I was going to be working on intervention groups for MD7, okay, then I could click any of these numbers and it'll break my students up into those different score groups. So I'm able to automatically see, well, these are going to be my intervention students. These are my bubble students right here, and these are my students that are, I feel are proficient in this standard and might could move a little bit further, go a little bit more in depth within this standard. So it's just an easy way to be able to sort those groups. And if I actually go back, another great part of this report, again, if I just focus on MD7, if I look all the way to the right-hand side, I can see how many times I've assessed this standard this year. So if I click where it says 4, then I can see the dates and the names of the assessments that covered this MD7. So they could have covered other standards as well, but at least MD7 was tagged here. So I'm able to go back and I can compare um, the student data on those assessments as well. All right, let's see. So yes, so the one that's going to show the student times, that is going to be on the item analysis. And this particular test did not have that, but let me see if I can find one that did. Sometimes I get lucky in the training site. And I'm able to find one that had that. Let's see. But yes, when you schedule a test, when you go to choose the like dates and you actually assign it and you like pull the sections that you want to assign it to, if you scroll down on that page, there's an option that says track student response times. And this is the report that it shows on. Let me see. Nope, that one does not have it either. I'll try one more and let me see if maybe it's in reading. Mm, let's see if maybe this one had it. It kind of depends on which one that they put it on. So if you do not turn that setting on, oh, I see. You're saying you don't see it when you go to schedule a test. I can show you that in just a second. Get this one to load real quick. Oh, that one didn't either. Okay. All right. So let me show you. So when you are, it's not showing up. Okay, so you're saying that you did put that option in. Okay, I want to make sure. So if I go to a test real quick, I'm just going to make a copy of this real fast. say real fast. I'm just realizing that I'm on the wrong Wi-Fi. I don't want to switch and mess up the call though. Yeah, I don't want to switch it to my other Wi-Fi. I definitely did not check that before. So I apologize for the slowness. I'm on my extended one. Did not realize. Okay. All right. So let me finalize this schedule. All right. So when you go to schedule, there is this right here. Item features this track and display student response time. So you'll want to make sure that that box is checked. And then when you check that box, then it will show, and there's got to be one in here because I know I've seen it on one of these assessments. And if it's not on this one, then I'll be happy to stay on after the call and we can look at your individual test. I'll be able to go into yours, but I'll look at this last one. Yeah, no, that one. Okay, so if you just want to stay on the call, then we can go to your specific test and I can show you where that would be if that option is checked. Okay, so let me go back to my math test. And I don't remember which test I was on. I think I was on this one. Here we go. Okay, so we've talked about item analysis, we talked about standards mastery. So the trends report, you can compare multiple assessments to each other, and it's going to compare things like the average score. So it's just a great way to see like really just how the whole section performed on that particular assessment and compare it. So I can compare up to 6 tests. I'm just going to choose a few different ones. I'll click go. I'm on extended Wi-Fi. There we go. All right, so then I would be able to see. Oh, it had loaded up and then it went away. Okay, 3, go. There we go. All right, so I can see test 1, test 2, and test 3, and it's going to show the standards, and then it will compare. So if I were comparing, like we'll just say for example that this was a like beginning of unit, this was a middle of unit, and this was an end of unit, it'd be a great way just to see how my class as a whole progressed on this particular standard across those three. And then you would be able to view the item analysis or the test detail of those individual reports, but this is going to compare those particular standards across those up to six different assessments. Okay. The last one, again, this is not going to show on a My Classroom assessment, but we've actually already seen this. So when you click on an item number in the item analysis report, this is the report that actually shows. So it is its own tab because of how often this was used. So if it is a school or district assessment and it does not have security on the assessment to where you can't see the question, then you'd be able to just go to this tab and view the items, see what the most common error was, see how the school versus the district performed on this particular assessment, and you can just scroll through each one of the items that way. But again, that will not show on a My Classroom assessment. Okay. All right, so those are all of the pre-formatted data reports. There are a few additional things that I want to show you in the reporting dashboard. So we are already in the reporting dashboard when we clicked on the pre-formatted report on our homepage. But if I go back where it says dashboard, then this is going to list all of the assessments for that particular section. So I can, of course, change the section that I'm viewing, or if I teach multiple sections of the same subject, you would have an option that says like reading all sections if I wanted to view all three of those or four of those. But if I stay focused just on this particular section, on the right-hand side, this is going to say that the results reflect current enrollment. If you teach semester-based courses and you wanted to view the previous semester, then if you click where it says current enrollment, you can change it to all students, and that would show the previous semester. Or you can view the past school years. So Schoolnet stores data for 8 years on the teacher and the student for like assessments. So if you needed to view a score from the previous year, especially if you're high school and when you get into like final grades and things like that, if there was ever a question about a Schoolnet assessment grade, then you can access up to 8 years prior of that data by clicking on the right-hand side where it says results reflect, and you can change that. Okay, but in the reporting dashboard, wanted to show you there is another report. It's not a pre-formatted one, it's one that you would actually kind of create yourself. But if I wanted to compare my EOG mixed review 5 to the 4 to the 3. Okay, so if I wanted to compare these three, I can check these boxes and click compare assessments. Okay, I choose what data I want to see. I also can scroll down and I can choose different data elements. So if I wanted gender or ESL or race or AIG to be selected, then I could do those as well. Or I could just come in here and select those program tags as well. So if I click generate report, then what it's going to do is it's going to give me 4 different tabs. Okay, but it's going to show the 3 assessments that I chose. It's going to color code them just based off of the assessment so that you can tell the difference in the assessments. But if I hover over, then I'm going to be able to see how many total items, what the average score, and how many students took the test for each one of these. Okay, and if I scroll down, then I'm able to compare the students and how they did overall on these assessments. So again, if we're thinking of if we do like a pre-test or a post-test, then I'd be able to see how the students did on the pre-test compared to the post-test. Okay, I can do that with the raw score, the proficiency, the yes or no, as the score group as well. You have additional tabs. Right, I was letting her back in. You do have additional tabs. Grade is, if you had different grade levels taking that assessment. You also have subgroup tab as well. Go back to students. If I come up here, I have my performance comparison, which is going to be the default tab, but I also have a standards comparison tab where I can see across the 3 assessments that I'm comparing how the students grew across all 3 of those. So it looks like NBT right here, this one was covered on all 3 of these assessments. So I'd be able to see from the first assessment all the way to the last how my students were doing. Now I can break this down to see specifically which standard. So it looks like NBT 2 was covered on all 3. And I can click this little icon right here, and that's going to show just specifically for NBT2 how the students did. Okay, So this is going to show how the students did on that specific standard across those three assessments. I can go back and go back to all standards, and I can do that for each one of the standards. And again, this is just going to show the proficiency on that specific standard that I chose. So this one was in F, but it's a great way to compare across like a pre-test or a post-test, how the students grew from the beginning to the end of the unit on the proficiency of those standards. So I love the comparison report. One other great thing is you can save this report so that you don't have to rebuild it every time. So you could save it, and then it would show in your little heart right here to the left-hand side where it says My Saved Reports, and then you could add assessments to it. So if I pulled open my saved report, I could then go in and add, we'll just say this one, run report again, and now it's going to have the same ones that I had chosen originally, those original three assessments, and now I have a fourth. So you can save it and build onto it if it's something that you want to revisit frequently with other assessments. And again, that is the comparison report, which is in the assessment dashboard. Okay, I believe I covered all of our reports. I'm double checking. Yes, I did. Perfect. And the slide deck is going to break down every single thing that we talked about today. So you don't have to worry about trying to remember which report I said to click on. All of it, we have screenshots for all of the things we talked about in the slide deck, and I'll make sure to put that back in the chat again. But last thing before we close up for today are some upcoming events. Of course, you are in today's session of Data Reports in Schoolnet, but our next webinar is in December, on December 8th, and that is talking about creating and editing questions in Schoolnet. So if you are interested in creating your own items or learning how to edit items, and by edit, I mean if it's multiple choice and you want to change it to a task item, you do have the option of doing that in Schoolnet, and we will be happy to show you how to do that on December 8th, so you can register for that. We also have in February coming up the NCA Connect Symposium. It is in Greensboro on February 9th through 11th. So if you are interested in attending that, you can get the registration from this slide right here. But other than those that has some specific questions, that is all that I have for you today. I do have feedback on slide 33 that I would request you to fill out when you have a chance. I would greatly appreciate it, just so we can see how we can make these sessions better for you. But for everyone else, it is 5:01. So I appreciate your time today. And I look forward to seeing you at future webinars. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.